can't run from yourself forever. And my mom's death was the catalyst to my transformation. But for someone else, it might be a divorce, or they lose their job, or they go bankrupt. Like in all of our lives, it's going to be something like that. And that's your moment to choose who you're going to be, how you're going to do this. Because if you just take a pill, or you just drink a bottle of wine, or you just smoke a joint, like that is not going to go away. Like it's still there. You're going to have anxiety. You're going to be tortured. You have to face yourself and do the work.
Welcome back to Happiness in Progress. I'm your host, Danielle Craig. I'm an Emmy Award winner, a journalist, a mom, wife, and just a person looking for more joy in the everyday. This podcast is brought to you by the Mail Tribune. You can find more podcasts at mailtribune.com. If you like listening, please take a quick moment to rate this podcast. I would so appreciate you doing that. It helps me obviously continue the work. So just give it a 5-star rating in iTunes. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button. I'm so excited to introduce you to today's guest. You are going to hear from Valerie Gangas. She is a transformational speaker, a life coach, and the best-selling author of Enlightenment Is Sexy. She's a life coach that helps people tap into their transpersonal or spiritual side to amp up the magic in everyday life, from relationships to jobs. She practices Transcendental Meditation, which we talk a lot about in this podcast episode. She was actually tapped to teach Oprah about it. You're going to hear about that experience with Oprah. You'll also hear about the moment that transformed her, what happened that helped her go from being suicidal to being joyful and full of life and this experience of being alive and seeing the things that were around her. You're also going to hear about what TM is, Transcendental Meditation, what that is, how it works. You're also going to find out how this can help you as we're stuck in a pandemic with very little certainty, with very little control. We're going to talk about the transformation that can happen while we're going through this. And with that, let's get to it. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
One of the things that hit me while I was researching all the things you've done is you have this conversation, you're working with Oprah, and then she says, I want what she has. About you, she says that. What is it that you have?
Well, I think at that point in time, I had lost my mom. So that was back in 2011. And I got extremely depressed. I mean, I was totally suicidal. And so I had like dipped down, like I was on my knees. And then I learned Transcendental Meditation through like a series of events that led me to it. And I didn't know what it was. Like I had never meditated or even thought about it. And in one meditation, I went from feeling completely suicidal to like waking up, which I didn't know what that was when it happened to me. But like I went into my meditation, like wanting to jump off a bridge. And I opened my eyes 25 minutes later and like the entire world was different. Colors were brighter, sounds were different. I mean, I knew that something major had happened. And then I met her 2 weeks later. So I was like glowing, you know, it was like the juice was running through my veins and she picked up on that. So I always like, when I think about it, it's really because I had had such an extreme experience, and the story was incredible because it was a miracle. So she tapped into that, and you know, she's hearing stories all day of awesome things that happened to people, but I think because I was sitting there in front of her, like basically alone and really speaking my truth, she just tapped into it. And she had just learned to meditate. So she wanted wanted that thing that had happened to me, that feeling of being reborn and just waking up. She was going down that path. It just happened to me really fast.
I have talked a lot on this podcast about loss. There's a lot of people who, obviously, most people have dealt with some kind of loss. And I think it might be hard for them to wrap their heads around how you can go from this deep, real loss of your mom, your best friend, to having this glow and this joy that Oprah can pick up on. Tell me about what TM, Transcendental Meditation, did to you. What was occurring?
Okay, so first of all, with TM, it's not like you're learning from an app or something like that. It takes 4 days. It's about 90 minutes each day, and you work with a TM teacher. And these
Mm-hmm.
teachers, they're extensively trained. I mean, they go away, like they cut themselves off from the world basically for I think it's like six months, and they're just learning how to teach people to meditate. It's a huge
Wow.
process. So they're really well trained. And um basically you're given a mantra, so it's just a sound that you follow. People now that I've been doing this for so long, like the biggest complaint I get, or not complaint, but worry, is I can't meditate. And I'm like, yes, you can, because there's something about this sound. It has no meaning. So when you think about it, it just brings you back into that meditative state. You're going past the mind. You're going to have thoughts. That's just stress leaving your body. But then you use the mantra as a tool to then dive back in and go deep.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a little ceremony that they do. It's like 5 minutes. They give you your mantra and they teach you how to use it. And like day one, I was a meditator. So I just did exactly what she told me to do. And then I just had this very, very deep experience. It felt like I was following the sound like deep, deep into my soul. Like I had dove into this like deep ocean that I did not know was inside of me. And it led me there. And then when I came back out, 20 minutes later, everything had changed. And now I know this isn't the norm. That doesn't happen to every person that learns TM, but over time, it does happen. It just may take a lot longer to get to that point. But I was in such an extreme place at that time, and I had like already surrendered. I mean, I was going to kill myself. So it was like the contrast was so much. It was black and white
Mm-hmm.
after I learned. So yeah, I always tell people it's like you need that silence in your life. You need that break every day because the world is so crazy and it keeps you up in your mind. And that's not where the magic is. The magic is deep within you, but you need a tool to tap into that every day. And after a while, like life just starts falling into place because you have that foundation, that core of silence. And then you can kind of like cruise a little bit more through life. Your emotions are no longer in charge. It's like your core is in charge, and that's solid. So
Wow.
that's how I experienced it.
I have so many questions just from that. So let's start with the moment of surrender. Tell me about that moment.
Okay, so my mom died at the end of January, and I'd say for a couple weeks I was like in a state of shock. And I also had like a really bad sleeping disorder, so that doesn't help. Like when you're not sleeping, like that makes everything worse. So as time went on, like I wasn't getting better. Like then I started becoming extremely sad, very anxious. I was having panic attacks every day. Um, and I couldn't pull myself out of it. And I like took Xanax. I'd try and drink some wine, like anything to calm my system down. Cause back then, like I thought that's what you had to do,
Mm-hmm.
but it just made everything worse. And so it started wearing on me where I just like could not get myself out of this black hole, and things were becoming darker and darker and darker. It felt like I was in a box, and I just couldn't take it anymore. Like I had just reached the end of my rope, and I was in the bathroom one day and in the shower, and I just like got on my knees. I remember the water hitting me and just saying, God, like you need to make a choice. You either save me or let me kill myself because I can't go on anymore. And that's not my personality. Like this wasn't like uh something that I'd ever dealt with before, anxiety and depression. I didn't have that. It hit me so hard and I didn't have the tools to pull out. So I just felt like, well, I just have to kill myself. But after I had that experience that day in the shower, it was only like maybe a week or two later that I met someone that suggested I learn TM so I could get some sleep. I mean, and
Wow.
little did we both know that I would have such an extreme experience. But I was like dead inside, I mean, now when I think about people that like commit suicide or, try and hurt themselves, I know what they feel like. They're already gone in a way inside
Mm-hmm.
because there's like nothing left of you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I felt. And then all of a sudden I learned to meditate and like I was filled with like joy and love and wonder. And it was like my soul came back and it was like on fire. And that's
Wow.
why like 2 weeks later, I'm have this whole new job, this whole new career. I'm a public speaker. I'm writing. I'm doing all these things. Like that came out of nowhere. I was in the bar and restaurant business before that. There's no connection.
It came out of yourself. It was there. You just didn't know how to tap into it.
Right. It was lying dormant. I mean, I had been I had been reading books about spirituality and religion since I was like, you know, 10 or 12 years old. I was a theology major in college. I thought about deep spirituality and all that, but it did not manifest in my day-to-day life. I was also like wild and a huge partier and like tons of friends, loved the restaurant business, loved working all night. You
Mm-hmm.
know, it was a different the lights came on and I was a different person. And I believe that that's like my true self, what came through.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. One of the things that I picked up from what you were saying is all these different ways you were trying to feel better, which I think so many people are trying to feel better in these ways, like drinking, zoning out. We're just trying to numb the pain or or do something with the pain. So that is really incredible because it makes almost my heart sink because that is our go-to in this American culture. That is where we go. We don't go to some kind of spiritual place. That's not our first thought.
No, because we're not raised that way. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
we're not told that it's an inside job, right? We're told by our doctors, parents, teachers, like, well, why don't you try this? Or like, go see your doctor and get on some medication. And I'm not saying there's a right time and a right place for medication. That's real. I mean, my brother had a serious mental illness. Without medication, it would have been a disaster. But ultimately, like that's not the answer because you can't run from yourself forever. And my mom's death was the catalyst to my transformation. But for someone else, it might be a divorce or they lose their job or they go bankrupt. Like in all of our lives, it's going to be something like that. And that's your moment to choose who you're going to be, how you're going to do this. Because if you just take a pill or you just drink a bottle of wine or you just smoke a joint, like that is not going to go away. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
still there. You're going to have anxiety. You're going to be tortured. You have to face yourself and do the work. And I always say, pick up a spiritual practice, go to therapy, like really make the changes that you need to make because it doesn't go away. It will
Mm-hmm.
haunt you for the rest of your life if you do not tap into your true self.
Mm-hmm. And most of us can't run from it forever.
Can't run forever. I'm always like, you can do it now when it's hard, or you can do it later when it's harder. And
Yeah.
I knew inside like I wasn't living the way I should be, but like I didn't know what to do about it. It took a disaster for me to wake up.
Mm-hmm. So let's go to waking up, that moment after you finish the meditation, you open your eyes. What are some of the thoughts you have?
I mean, I was pretty confused, but like I also felt so awesome that I just like let it be. I was like, oh my God, everything's different. I was in Chicago and I was on Lakeshore Drive, and Lakeshore Drive, obviously the lake's behind you. And so I was like looking out at the water after I was done meditating and I was like, the whole lake looks different to me. And there was children playing, like I think I was like on the 15th floor of this building or whatever, and there was children playing and their voices, like they sounded like angels. And I
Mm.
remember before I had meditated, I was like, those kids are so annoying. Like that was the thought in my head. And then I was like, they sound like angels. And then when I was driving home, like I could feel the roar of the engine of the car that
Wow.
I was in. Like I was one with everything. And then I went home and basically slept for like 15 hours till I had to go back the next day.
Wow.
I mean, my sleeping disorder was gone, in 1 second. Like everything was correcting itself. But it took about 2 weeks to like get my sleep debt under control. Like I slept every day. And then I started having like extraordinary experiences, like meeting all sorts of cool people, lots of synchronicity. I didn't feel like I wanted to go out. I just kind of felt like I wanted to like hang out with trees and just the totally opposite of what I was before. And that was the beginning. Now, this is a long process. Like if you have experiences like this, it's a shift of consciousness. So now everything is different. And you need books, people that understand you, like that understand these concepts to help you, because it's very confusing because you now have become different than most of the people around you.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a long process. It's just, I started out like real fast out of the gate.
Yeah, right. I had never meditated in my entire life, and a series of unfortunate events happened in our family, and I came across meditation. It was a guided meditation, and I did it, and it was so eye-opening to me. And after that, I felt like I was living on a different plane of existence. Like we weren't all on the same page. And so I've talked a lot about guided meditations. I've had people come on, they've led the guided meditations, but I have not talked about TM. So can you explain to me a little bit of the difference between the two?
So I only practice TM. I mean, I know about different meditations, but just like as a side note, like it worked so well for me. I just stuck with it.
Yeah.
And the difference is like there's no talking. There's no like, got to go back to your mind, got to go back to your mind. You are simply just given a mantra and you have this sound and you just use it. You have some thoughts, you just go back to the mantra and then it just takes you right back down. You're just transcending. And you do it over and over, twice a day, 20 minutes at a time. And it's like they have like the way they explained it to me, it's like you're dipping a cloth into, dye, and then you're putting it out in the sun. It's like you're dipping your being into this transcendence, into this silence over and over and over again. So you just like become that. You become the silence. You become, a higher state of consciousness. It's in your cells because you're doing it over and over and over again. And now, like, yeah, I still say my mantra sometimes, but really I've just like trained my mind. Like I just close my eyes and I'm gone. It's just like I'm in that space that feels like nothing and everything at the same time.
That is
And
so cool.
meditators understand that when you say that to them, it's like it's so rich, that space, but it's also just silence.
It's powerful because we don't experience that space in our regular everyday life.
No.
So you're talking about the mantra. When I think about mantras, I'm thinking like 2 to 3 words that I'm going to say over and over again, but that's not what this is.
It's just one sound.
Like, can you give me an example of what that sounds like?
Well, we don't we were told like don't say your mantras out loud because you like
Okay.
it becomes part of your being.
Part
And
of
when you
you.
like speak things out loud, then you're like giving a meaning or attaching them to something. But it's like a very simple, like no-brainer sound.
Okay. So like maybe that's where when I was growing up, my thought of meditation was like you sit and you say over and over again, but it's kind of like something like
That's a mantra, right?
Okay.
So
Okay.
that's not the types of mantras that they use, but it's very similar to that. That's a great example.
Okay. I love that there is that protection of that too, that's yours, not something out to put into the world.
It's yours, and it becomes very personal. Like, and they pick these mantras for specific reasons for each person. So it's personalized in a way, and it just becomes like I have no meaning attached to my mantra at all. It's my tool.
Wow. Very cool. And so it's the same over and over and over again.
Over and over and over again. Like,
Is there a
it's
time
almost
that you
hard.
would need a different mantra? Like, do you
No,
ever switch?
mm-mm,
Okay. Okay.
never. You don't switch. You just keep it and you use it. And like, it's almost hard for me to even like think about it because it just is just part of me now.
Wow. Wow. Very, very cool. So, right now, a lot of people are struggling. They're living in this pandemic. How can TM help with that uncertainty and help with the unknowns of what's happening right now?
I think when you begin meditating, and especially when you're meditating for a while, you get really good at putting things in perspective. Your emotions aren't like out of control. Your nervous system has been trained to kind of just hum instead of like spinning out of control, fight or flight all the time. So I think no matter what happens to you in your life, when you are meditating a lot regularly, not like skipping it and doing it every once in a while, but really regularly, you can handle almost anything. I have had, since my mom died, I've had 8 other family members die.
Mhm.
I reacted very differently to all their deaths. I was able to be more present. I could help them more because I was way more in control. I was like back in my body.
Mhm.
So, I mean, that was like a huge difference. And it's not until you're in the moment and you see how you react that you're like, wow, I'm really different. Because this is like heavy duty stuff and I could just handle it. Whereas before, I mean, obviously, like I was a disaster. So you just become more resilient.
Mhm. For someone who's listening, actually, let me ask you this. Do you run into a lot of people who are like, "No, it won't work for me. I can't do it. Like, it's not going to
Sure.
work for me." Or maybe they try it a couple times and are like, "I didn't have this amazing experience in my first 2 times and I'm out." Tell me about what those conversations look like.
Yeah, I mean, hey, it's not for everybody, right? I mean, you have to I didn't know what I was getting into. I like was completely flying blind. So, but the from the first time I meditated, I was like, you were born to be a meditator.
Mm,
So, I've had a lot of my family members and friends and everything learn, and some don't stick with it. Some it changed their lives completely. I think you have to find what is right for you.
mhm,
And if you feel like, I don't want to do that, like that feels weird, I don't want to do it, well, then like you shouldn't do that. That's probably not right for you,
mhm,
But there's something out there that's right, even if it's like walking in nature every day. Like there has to be something in your life that connects you back to something bigger than yourself. To
mhm,
just live in this world and like go to your job, come home, have a cocktail, watch TV, go to bed, do it again. Like you're doing yourself a disservice. You're not connected, really.
mhm, mhm.
And that ultimately just leads to pain because we're not supposed to live like that.
Mhm. I think so many people just that description of come home, drink, watch TV, that is the American lifestyle. That's what we do in this country and that's what we know.
And there's so much more in like the simple areas of life.
Mhm.
When you start having these experiences and you like go outside in the morning and you like look at the animals or you look at the trees or the grass, like you love them. It's like
Mhm.
the wonder is inside of you and you see it everywhere. It's like it's so magical. And when you turn your back on all of that, it's you're missing. It's like the best part of life, and you're
Mhm.
missing that when you don't give yourself some silence and peace and really like calm your nervous system down so you can connect deeper to things. Like that's what's important, and
Mhm.
you the ability to love more, the resilience that I talked about, the wonder, the creativity, like it all comes to you when you incorporate silence into your life.
Mhm. How can doing this daily, transcending, practicing TM, how can doing this every day help you with the problems like dealing with losing a job or not being able to pay the bills because you're sitting in the pandemic and you haven't had a job in more than 3 months? How does TM play a role in those real issues that are really heavy for people?
So I found after I started meditating, like I started having unbelievable luck. Like all
Mhm.
of a sudden, like everything was going my way. There was no trying. I didn't have to like plan everything. I just started like living in the moment and there's so much trust going on because everything was coming to me. Things I didn't even know I wanted. It was like something would happen and I'd be like, that is incredible. Wow, that just like showed up. Like I didn't even know I wanted that. So it was like everything was backwards. So once I learned to meditate, the first thing I said to my teacher was, everything I thought I knew was wrong. Like it's backwards. You think you need to be like pushing and trying and planning and scheming and this and that. But really, if you can just get back into your body and like slow it down, give yourself that chance to transcend a couple times a day, you'll see like things just start working out for you. And it's like, wow, it's like all of a sudden you're like in the flow. You're back in the zone of like things are going to be okay. And even when they're not okay, they're still okay, if that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense. Like
Mm-hmm.
you're like, oh, this is part of life and this is going to lead me to something else now. You become more positive
Mm-hmm.
and you can just like see deeper into situations. It's not black and white anymore. It's like, oh, okay, well, maybe I lost my job, but I talked to this person last week and they were like talking about this cool other position. I'm going to call them. You just start connecting the dots. It's easier
Mm-hmm.
to do that because you have expanded your awareness now. It's not like you're looking through a pinhole anymore and everything is like, oh my God, what am I going to do? It's more like, this sucks, but I know there's something better around the corner.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I love how you explain that. I remember when I first started meditating, it was really like doors were opening and things that I wanted, I wasn't necessarily going out and announcing to the world, but somehow they were still coming back to me. It was really incredible experience. Really incredible.
It's the most magical thing I have ever
It's the
experienced.
magic.
I'm with
Mm-hmm.
you.
Mm-hmm. Is that how you ended up in front of Oprah?
Yeah, so my TM teacher um, was connected with the David Lynch Foundation. And I mean, I didn't know any of this, but Oprah had decided that she learned TM, and then she wanted to have her entire staff, anyone that wanted to learn, they could learn TM for free. So that was New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago. And her main corporation, like her main offices and stuff, were in Chicago. And so I had such a wonderful experience. They asked me if I would work with them. And I was like, no, I'm going to go open a bar. Like, I feel awesome now. I'm going to like raise some cash, open a bar, do the work that I know how to do. And then through like a series of events that were like very clear, I was supposed to take this job. I ended up taking the job 2 weeks later. And then I worked at Harpo Studios for 2 years and then different corporations all over Chicago speaking about TM, like a medical school, advertising firms, like all that, because people would go in and then have their whole staff trained.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I didn't see that coming at all. I mean, at all, at all.
I identify so much with your story because you were still like, no, I've got this other thing that I've been planning, for however long. I know how to do the bar thing. It's really incredible. It's amazing what opens up.
My life was no longer my own. I realized that pretty quickly. Like something else had taken over and I was like riding a new wave. And I just had to, that first time I surrendered in the shower, that was just the tip of the iceberg. Now I was just saying, yes, okay, show me what I need to do and I'll just do it. My mind almost like went offline. There was a chapter in my book I wrote, Thinking is Overrated, because I didn't really have to think anymore. It was all being laid out in front of me. The difference was that now I could see it.
Mm-hmm. For someone listening who's like, ooh, but I'm not sure I'm ready to hand over my life. This sounds scary. Should I really take the first steps? What would you say to them?
No, it's amazing to have something greater than you kind of calling the shots, because that's the best way to live your life. You are really not in control. I mean, you're making decisions, you have free will and all that, but there's a bigger picture at play. There's karma at play. There's all these different relationships. This is not random that you were born into this family or have this group of friends or live in some part of the world. Like, there is something bigger making this whole system work,
Mm-hmm.
down from the little ants, to a prime minister. Like, there is some order. And if you can tap into that a little bit, then you see the unfolding of it,
Mm-hmm.
especially when you look backwards. it's like, oh, that's why that happened. That led me to that. And then that led me to that. And then that led me to that. And it's all perfect.
It's amazing. So we are in a time of basically not a lot of control. We really don't have a lot of control with what's going on with the pandemic. What is a piece of advice you would give to people listening about how to rise up within the circumstances that are out of their control?
Well, I mean, it's a perfect time because we've been shoved into this corner where like you can't go to the office, you're working from home. This is a time to like reset, to say like, well, I didn't like the way that was before. So now I'm going to change my diet, or I'm going to get more involved with my children. I was kind of blowing them off because I was always busy with work or doing this and that. I mean, it's giving us the opportunity to make major changes in our lives, whether we like it or not. And transformation can be painful. And feels like a global transformation. Like I've never seen something like this in my lifetime. And it's like, take the opportunity to do something good, change your life in a positive way. It's like, what else are you going to do? Like, we had time to freak out, but now we're like in month 4 or 5. It's like, use this as a tool to make the changes that you've always wanted to make.
And I like that I know this isn't your room, but I like that you're sitting in front of these butterflies, because that transformation from the caterpillar to the butterfly is like literally the caterpillar like turns to goo or something really terrible that's not easy to go through, but to then become that. So that I just couldn't help but make the connection.
That's how we do it as humans. It usually takes some sort of like bop on the head in a big way to wake us up. And again, I think it's all perfect. It's the way it's set up because we don't pay attention. We're like, I don't know, everything's fine. I'm going to have another martini and just like call it a day. But really, it's not fine. And we know that deep down inside when you're stuck in a bad marriage or you hate your job or things aren't right. You can't get there. And it usually takes a cancer scare or something intense to just crack you open. And that's the gift.
For me, I've talked about it a lot on this podcast. It was the moment my husband's heart stopped for 7 seconds while he was connected to machines, and it literally like flatlined in our house because we had just called the ambulance, and it was a terrifying experience, and it just like snapped me out of what the world I was living in. The running. You talk about the running, and I just so identify with the running all the time, not stopping. All right, the last question I want to ask you is, this podcast is all about finding more joy in the everyday. And so I like to ask the last question: how would you find more joy? What's your number one tip to doing that in the good, the bad, and the in-between of life?
Starting with something as simple as silence, just starting with that, having some sort of silence in your life. I love the idea of connecting with nature every day. And I also like the idea of living simply, like making it less complicated and just being easy with yourself, like give yourself a break. Life can be really hard, and just know it's going to be okay, but you got to do a couple things to get yourself to that place.
Valerie, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your experience. And I am so excited to try TM because I've only done I've been trying to clear my throat the whole time. I've only done guided meditations, and those have been life-changing for me, but I'm really excited about this idea of transcending. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
You're probably born a meditator too if you're already having those experiences. It's awesome.
Incredible, right? I hope you loved listening to Valerie. I am so excited to try TM. And of course, as always, I am linking all of her information, how to follow her on social, how to stay in touch with her, as well as where to get her book. And with that, I want to thank you for being here on Happiness in Progress.